Good evening, everyone. The Domestic Scouting Department is thrilled tonight with the selections of 4 additional players in the 2020 first-year player draft. Hudson Haskin, a center fielder from Tulane, Anthony Servideo, a shortstop from Ole Miss, Kobe Mayo from Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, and Carter Baumler from West Dowling High School in Iowa. We once again would like to congratulate all 6 of our selections and look forward to seeing them soon. I also wanted to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to several groups throughout the Orioles organization. First and foremost, our scouts. The long hours that they've had to put in this spring before the shutdown and adjusting afterwards to a new routine was pivotal for us down the stretch. Our scouting analyst team did a tremendous job knowing the ins and outs on all of these guys. Sig and Michael Weiss and our analytics team, our developers that helped us build so many essential tools to keep our team running during the shutdown, and also our player development and international scouting staff who led us a hand throughout the entire process, watching video of these guys and giving us feedback, which was instrumental in the entire evaluation process. And last but not least, I'd also like to extend my thanks to Michael Elias and, of course, the support of the Angelos family. Although the 2020 first-year player draft presented new challenges not seen previously during any spring season, I feel our staff did an incredible job adjusting, and I'm looking forward to seeing these guys in black and orange.
All right, thanks, Brad. First question tonight from Rock Kabako, MASNsports.com, followed by John Mioli. Rock?
Hey, Brad. This was a draft that was considered really deep in college pitching, especially, and just pitching as a whole. And the club kept passing till they took the high school kid in the 5th round. What was the thinking there and not grabbing a pitcher sooner when there was that many college arms?
Yeah, Rock, I'll just say this. We had pitchers all up and down our board that we thought we had in good spots. And for whatever reason, we either liked the position player at that point in time better, or the fact that, the pitchers went right before our next selection. So unfortunately, that's just the way that sometimes the draft works. And that's ultimately what ended up happening here, until we ended up taking Carter with our last selection.
Next, John Mioli, Baltimore Sun, followed by Dan Connolly. John?
How's it going, Brad? I was wondering if you could take us through, I guess, the week and maybe months leading up to this where Heston kind of climbed from being in the mix to really the guy at number 2.
Sure. So I guess what I should do is kind of start back to the entire history with Heston. In Heston, we liked him as a bat coming out of high school. Ken Guthrie, our scout, knew the family extremely well. And, while he was at his at high school in Randall Canyon High School in Amarillo, he basically told us that he really liked the potential of the bat, and he just wasn't sure, if the power was going to come. And then, fast forward a few months later at Arkansas, he added significant amounts of strength to his frame. And ultimately, that was very conducive to hitting a lot of extra base hits and home runs. But initially, we saw Heston over the summer with Team USA, and we scouted him heavily there. And ultimately, depending upon the day you were there or just looking at his stat line, you could see that he was one of the more consistent performers and hitters with Team USA. So we had a lot of healthy follow grades on him. We scouted him heavily in the spring. We saw him at the Shriners Classic at Minute Maid Park, where he hit a home run about 430 feet to dead center, showed off a plus arm, and also, moved well for a bigger guy. And we were just kind of intrigued by the bat potential, the power, and high contact in the strike zone with Heston. That's one thing that was intriguing to us about Heston this year, more so than years past, is that we looked at his swings in the strike zone. And with pitches in the zone, there wasn't a whole lot of swing and miss. So initially leading up to the draft, we did more research on that. And we also looked at his batted balls and the exit velocities and, essentially how the ball jumped off the bat to all fields. And our scouts also had plus raw power grades across the board on him. So it was essentially a blend of old school scouting and also the advanced analytics that ultimately made him an extremely attractive fit in our eyes. We also scheduled a Zoom call with Heston. And the one thing that, you guys may have noticed with his stat line this year is that the strikeouts were down and the walks were up a little bit. The on-base numbers were a little bit better. So we asked Heston, if he was doing anything different. And he told us that he was making it a point of emphasis to be more selective in his approach and really try to focus on an area of the strike zone and attack a pitch that he's looking for. So based upon our research that our analytics team did and the fact that he got off to such a torrid start at Arkansas, we were convinced that if the season had continued to progress, that Heston would have been a candidate not only for the Golden Spikes Award, but also a potential top 5 selection in the draft. And a lot of comparisons can be made to him very similarly to J.J. Bleday last year. You know, J.J. last year was not considered a unanimous top 5 selection by a lot of publications or experts, and he essentially played his way there. And due to the performance at his time at Vanderbilt, ultimately ended up going as a top 5 selection. So there's a lot of similarities between J.J. and Heston. And Heston's been a proven performer at the SEC. We've always liked him. And, you know, he also has the makeup, the drive, the motivation that we're looking for. And, you know, Brandon Hyde, when he came and talked to our scouts in November, he basically told us he wanted us to keep one thing in mind when we were looking at guys, you know, in addition to working hard and being dedicated and having the work ethic. And that is, the 3 words were nice, don't play. And Heston certainly has the edge to him. He's a fierce competitor, and that's the type of mindset and type of guy that we need, you know, if we're going to compete in the AL East.
Next up, Dan Connolly, followed by Joe Trezza. Dan?
Brad, obviously signability is always important for you guys, but specifically with only 6, this time out. When you guys selected Heston, there was a lot of speculation that it wasn't potentially an underslot, allowing you guys to have some money for later on in the draft. And in following it, it looks like maybe those last 2 guys who are high school guys who aren't, who have big time college commitments could fall into that category. Will they fall into that category? Do you have any concerns about signing? And what is the situation overall with any other potential underslot guys?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think the one thing I can say here is that I can't really go into specifics since these negotiations are ongoing. But what I will say is that in regards to the 2 high school players, we feel really confident in our ability, to make them an offer that they will deem acceptable. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're able to pull that off.
Next up, Joe Trezza, MLB.com, followed by Rich Dubroff. Joe?
Hey, Brad, thanks for doing this. I know it's a long, grueling day for you. If you look at this year's draft and last year's draft kind of both at the same time, you see a lot of position players, especially from the college ranks. It's kind of a spin on Rock's question, but can you just take us through, is it fair to call that a strategy or just what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, Joe, it's more or less kind of the same situation as last year where we just lined up our board and essentially just took the best player that was on our board at that given time. In this case, again, it was mostly college position players up until, Kobe and then obviously Carter with our last selection. But there wasn't necessarily a philosophical approach to that, for the 2020 draft, similarly like it was in 2019.
Next, Rich Dubroff, BaltimoreBaseball.com, followed by Steve Molesky. Rich?
Hey, Brad, going into the draft, did you have 6 players in each round that one in each round that you really wanted to have, that you really focused on? And if so, how close did you come to fulfilling those goals with these players?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we necessarily had focus prospects, in certain rounds. It was essentially just kind of ranking them and ultimately, again, taking the best guy, who was at the top of our board with each pick.
Next, Steve Molesky, MASNsports.com, followed by Stan Charles. Steve?
Brad, I think the signing deadline is August 1st. Correct me if that's not right. And so the question is, without any games right now, is there an advantage to quick signing these guys, or is there a little time to kind of relax now and take care of that? And secondly, do you anticipate spending at or near the full slot amount, the full pool?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as you guys know, we tried to move fast in the past just because we want to get these guys up and running and get them on the field as soon as possible. Obviously, with the pandemic, the first and utmost concern is the safety of every single guy that we drafted and also our staff as well. So we're working with Major League Baseball in finding potential avenues to make sure we can get these guys processed from a medical standpoint. And then ultimately we have to wait and see what happens as far as, whether there's going to be something, whether it's an extended instructional league or if these guys are just going to end up, going back home and training and working from home. But for right now, there probably isn't as much urgency as there would be in years past, but we're essentially going to kind of take it a day at a time and wait and, adhere to the advice and guidelines set forth by Major League Baseball. And to answer your question about the bonus pool, again, the situation is somewhat fluid, so I can't go into specifics on that right now. So unfortunately, I can't really shed any more light on that one.
Next, Stan Charles, PressBoxOnline.com, followed by Nathan Ruiz. Stan?
Brad, I want to echo what Joe said. Thanks for doing this so late at night. Wanted to talk to you about something we probably never pay attention in the media is the undrafted free agents. Vastly different scenario. Could you talk about sort of how you're handling that process and whether you think there's some good talent that you could sign in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So now with the draft concluded, we're going to reconvene tomorrow, our scouts, our development staff, and try to essentially target guys that we think would be, significant impact players, even though they were not considered draft selections in the 2020 first-year player draft. And we'll make every attempt to recruit those guys and try to sell them the benefits of joining the Orioles organization. We do have a 48-hour quiet period. So we're not actually 72-hour quiet period. So we're not allowed to reach out to those guys or their advisors until Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So the next 2 days will be, extensive research and discussions with our scout and development staff and trying to figure out how many of these guys will be able to grab and sign in the roster space, and then we'll kind of move forward from there. But ultimately, we're looking to continue to add more talent, even if we're only allowed to offer up to $20,000 for these guys.
Nathan Ruiz, Baltimore Sun, followed by John Mioli. Nathan?
Hey, Brad. I was wondering if you kind of just give us a quick scout of the 4 guys you took today and also just your overall sentiment of the class you guys were able to come away with.
Sure, yeah. So Hudson Haskin, the first thing that stands about him is the overall athleticism that he has. He is a double-plus runner. We believe that he's going to stay in center field. And he also has a knack for barreling up the ball consistently. So he also has sneaky power. He had double-digit home runs last year in his freshman year at Tulane, and we think if the season continued to go on, we would have seen a power spike with those numbers. But all around, he's a very tooled-up athlete, and we like the ability for him to stay in center field. As far as Anthony Servideo, we've kind of been following ever since he was in high school. And, he really popped up on our radar this spring. He got off to a blistering start with Ole Miss. He kind of ran into some power, and we were kind of intrigued by his athleticism in the dirt, how well he moved laterally, how well the hands worked, and he has more than enough arm strength to stay at shortstop and stay in the dirt. Kobe Mayo is extremely interesting. He is a strong, athletic, 6'4" kid with a double-plus arm at third base. He moves well for a bigger guy, and he also shows 70 raw power in BP, and we think that we'll be able to tap into that down the road. So he has an extremely high ceiling, and we do like his chances to stay at third base. And obviously Carter Baumler is another excellent athlete. He has a quick arm. His velo over the summer was 90 to 92, and now it's ticked up 92 to 94. He's got a curveball as 11.5 shape, and we think it's going to profile as a plus offering for him. And his changeup has made tremendous strides as well over the past few months, since the summer. So that's pretty much those guys in a nutshell. We think that we got a really good blend of guys that, can move quickly through the minor league system, and also some high ceiling high school guys with our last 2 selections.
John Mioli, Baltimore Sun, followed by Joe Trezza. John?
Thanks for the follow-up, guys. Brad, both you and Mike have talked about, how you kind of projected out how the rest of the season would have gone for especially some of these college guys who had gotten off to good starts. how strongly were those projections and what baseball there was in February and early March factor into the overall picture of where you guys evaluated guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. They are weighed pretty heavily just because of the fact that this is not your typical spring. So we essentially had to supplement the looks that we had on these guys from the 4 weeks of the college season with data points. And that's where our analysts came in and Michael Weiss and Sig. So we leaned heavily on them for those additional insights. But I think what's also most important is that, every single one of these guys that we selected, there was a balance between scouting and analytics. It wasn't just one or the other. We got together over the last month or so and really harnessed in on this group of players and ultimately put these guys in order based upon, the whole body of work and weighing both sides of the equation.
Next, Joe Trezza, MLB.com, followed by Dan Connolly. Joe?
Brad, just quick follow-ups on two of those guys. With Cervideo, was there any concern or room for pause with his Cape Cod League performance last summer? And with Kobe Mayo, he has such a big arm, and there were several two-way players or players taken as two-way players in this draft. Do you guys view him only as a position player?
Yeah, so as far as Anthony is concerned, obviously the Cape was not a shining moment for him, but watching him this spring at Ole Miss, and we had guys running there early, we were really impressed with his increased plate discipline and the power. So, we're not overly concerned. I think as far as his body of work, we're taking, what he's done most recently early on this spring, and we like his chances of continuing to add to the power department and also, the on-base skills moving forward. As far as Kobe Mayo is concerned, we see him strictly as a third baseman. We like the power in the bat, and, we think there's, again, significant upside there with him at third base.
Next up, Dan Connolly, The Athletic. Dan?
Yeah, Brad, real quick. The first 4 guys were obviously college guys, and then you had a warm weather high school guy. But Baumler's a guy in Iowa. I think they said he may have only pitched one time in high school this year. Did you guys get any live looks at him, and how did you go from there if you did? Yeah,
so unfortunately that start was after Major League Baseball enacted the scouting ban. So we went based off of our summer looks, and Major League Baseball did a great job of making sure that all 30 clubs had access to video on these guys. So we saw a lot of Carter's pens. He uploaded some Edgertronic footage, so we were able to take a look at that and see how it looked. And again, that kind of goes back to this is not your typical year, so we kind of had to supplement bits and pieces and other pieces of information, for in specifics in regards to him in the and throughout the evaluation process. So it was a little bit different in that regard, but we felt good because we had scouted him heavily over the summer. And, our scout, Scott Thomas, had stayed in consistent contact with him throughout this process. And we also kind of got inside looks because of the fact that Carter would upload video for all 30 clubs to see, so we can keep track of his progress.
Stan Charles, Press Box Online. Stan?
Brad, just a quickie on this is the first draft with sort of the full analytics department there. And I know Mike and Sig have worked hard at putting it together. Could you comment on the work that they did?
Yeah, it's been incredible just to see how far our internal system has come, in just a couple of years. We didn't really have anything like this, previously, and the amount of information now that is at our fingertips, our front office personnel's fingertips and our scouts' fingertips is just night and day in comparison to what it was. So, D and Sig and our development team and our analyst team, deserve a lot of credit. We would not have been as well as prepared as we were if it were not for those guys and the tireless hours that they put in, in creating and boosting up our systems.
All right. If there are no other questions, last call. All right. All set.
Great.
Thanks, Brad, for your time for tonight.